No one wants to buy insurance or think about insurance. It's the only thing I can think of that you pay for and you hope to never use.
Today, I'm speaking with Jenna Lebel, CMO of Liberty Mutual Insurance, a diverse global insurer that offers a wide range of services and is known for its creative and memorable ads.
It's a really interesting category from a marketing perspective. It's hard to watch anything these days without seeing an insurance ad.
Consumers don't really want to discuss insurance all day, if we're being honest. How does that factor into kind of a brand reinvention, a brand refresh, which is one of your directives as CMO?
When you don't have a tangible product to hold in front of a consumer, the category, along with us, sort of rely on brand cues, whether that be branded mascots or jingles, taglines, all of those things to really keep the brand top of mind. And because of that,
Welcome to Top CMO. I'm chatting with Jenna Lebel, CMO at Liberty Mutual Insurance. And Jenna, maybe a place to start is you're in a category that is competing for a lot of consumer attention. It's a high spend category. Plus you have, 100+ year old brand that you want to make more relevant, but consumers don't really want to discuss insurance all day, if we're being honest. So how does that factor into kind of a brand reinvention, a brand refresh, which is one of your directives as CMO?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Ben. And great first question. Insurance is a fun category. Like you said, it's commoditized, it's cluttered, one of the highest spend categories. So it's hard to watch anything these days without seeing an insurance ad. Price is the number one reason that consumers shop and purchase a policy. To your point, no one wants to buy insurance or think about insurance. It's the only thing I can think of that you pay for and you hope to never use. We don't entirely know the cost of goods sold at the point of sale. And so it's a really interesting category from a marketing perspective. And because of that, we need to be top of mind with consumers. And so a prerequisite of success is that strong top of mind brand awareness. And we've grown our brand awareness faster than anyone in the category over the last 10 years, and it will continue to be a top priority. And I think what goes into that, when you don't have a tangible product to hold in front of a consumer, the category, along with us, sort of rely on brand cues, whether that be branded mascots or, in our case, a spokes duo or jingles, taglines, all of those things to really keep the brand top of mind. And then when it comes to being relevant with consumers, I think because insurance is such a serious business and people don't want to think about the bad things that could potentially happen to them, we sort of rely on humor to distract them, to break through, to drive ad recall, and sort of entertain consumers, right? We know that we're disrupting whatever it is they're watching, and we're doing it at a high frequency. So how can we provide a little bit of entertainment and humor in our advertising?
And one of the signature campaigns, and I think the campaigns, one of the ones that we've chatted about that you're continuing to invest in is I guess you'd call it Limu Emu and Doug, which is an actual emu and another person. You're in a category where you're competing with geckos. You're competing with a lot of mascots and a lot of entertainment and humor. So how do you think about evaluating that when it's crossing your desk and it's like, do we want to invest in an emu and his friend, and is this worthy of our spend? And you're putting aside this gecko next to it and saying, what do you think? How do you go about that to sort of say like we have ROI from this, and in the competitive set, we think we can break through?
Yeah. So believe it or not, Limu and Doug is coming up on its 5th year in market. And when we went down the path of developing a spokes character, we had dozens of characters, everything from singing bears to, we had a dinosaur, we had a pigeon, we had everything you could think of was on the table. And
I would have loved to be in that meeting with like the pigeons here. It's like, I think the pigeon is going to tap into a new demographic. I would have loved to see all the positioning work done on the pigeon. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, there were a lot of jaws that were dropped. The pigeon talked. We're because we're trying to break through and keep Liberty Mutual top of mind, like we're really focused on 2 things when it comes to our advertising. It's, does the brand come through and do people remember the ad? Does the brand come through? That's why we loaded up our ads with logos, with the jingle. Limu and Doug are wearing branded uniforms. We're really trying to get the branding to come through. And then, just remembering the ad, like it's hard to not remember, a bird and a man telling people that they could save money by customizing their car insurance. And I think there's something familiar about that trope, right? The buddy duo trope. You've seen it in movies and TV shows over the years, and there's also something unexpected about it because you have a man and then a flightless bird who doesn't talk. And so we test all of our ads in front of thousands of consumers before we ever go make them. And so we tested this in front of 18,000 consumers, along with several other campaigns, including the talking pigeon. And it performed really well in terms of driving that brand recall, driving that ad recall. Likability was pretty high. We saw a lot of positive things. Humor was high. And so we felt like this was the path we wanted to go down, and it could stand the test of time. That was another thing that was important to us. We didn't want to introduce something that consumers would get sick of pretty quickly. And we keep a pulse on that. So we actually just did another round of qual and quant where we're, checking with consumers to make sure that there really is longevity here. And we feel pretty confident there is.
Well, and how do you think about evolution and staying fresh just creatively? I mean, and I can give you an example. I mean, we chatted also with the CMO at State Farm, and they have a whole campaign that's, about kind of like Jake from State Farm. And there's a kind of a famous thing where he's like a khaki wearing, person. And there was kind of a funny ad, and it turned into a whole big thing. And then they had to change, like, from it was originally cast as an actual agent. And then they realized they needed an actor who was like more available and all this kind of stuff. So how do you kind of like, you're 5 years in, listen to what people are saying, evolve, how much of it is expected, the response, like, yep, it matched your testing. You knew exactly how it was going to be. And how much of it is like, oh, didn't realize that ad or that creative would spark something. Let's run with it. Let's be more flexible. How do you evolve?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly listening. I would say, like, we do a ton of research. We're constantly listening to what's happening in social, what's happening in pop culture. And we sort of knew we were onto something when we started to see it pop up a lot more. Like, we had celebrities talking about the campaign. It was on Jeopardy, New York Times crossword puzzle. We had multiple SNL appearances. And so we sort of knew we were onto something. And I think, the team is really focused on, like, instead of us just thinking about what is the future of Limu and Doug, let's listen to, what people want to see from the brand and from this duo in particular. And so you're starting to see us introduce new characters. So we've introduced the wives. So Limu's wife, Doug's wife. We've introduced their sons in a spot that's currently on air. We've introduced new settings. So you've seen them in the office. You've seen them out in the real world. You've seen them at their homes. And so we're starting to dimensionalize the characters a little bit more. And something you'll see from us in the very near future is that we're going to do a crossover of an ad from a different campaign and bring that into Limu and Doug's world, just because similar to the example you just gave, we had an ad a few years ago that really struck gold, and we want to figure out a way to, bring that back. And we think we found a way, and I think consumers are really going to like it.
And you come, originally from actually a digital marketing agency background. And obviously this is we've talked about a competitive category. There's a lot of like kind of big budget TV spend. Take us through the performance marketing side that goes with it. And I know you've spoken about, we've chatted about in the past about, becoming a digital first brand. So what does that mean to be a digital first brand? A lot of digital first brands can't spend on this kind of like TV, right? So how is it in that, you've got a really big hammer that isn't digital first, but then you want to be maybe more precise in targeting. How does that all work together?
Yeah, we're advertising and marketing across all tactics, both on the brand side as well as the acquisition side. And when we think about being digital first, it's truly about like making sure that we are available to consumers, to customers, to our agents, through all touch points. So I would say we're never going to like not answer the phone, of course, but we want to make sure that we're providing digital tools, digital service for our customers, our agents, our partners. When we think about marketing, I would say, we're really looking at driving two main objectives. It's building that brand awareness. So that's all of the branded tactics like like TV, like radio, like social. And then obviously we have some pretty lofty growth goals for us as well. And so all of our acquisition tactics are really focused on bringing the most profitable new business. And so we spend across, the normal places you think, paid search, we're heavily invested there. We're doing a lot of direct mail, email, where it's like more precise targeting, looking at LTV and making sure that we're bringing in profitable new business growth. And it's sort of a balance between those two budgets in terms of where we want to continue to invest, because there are a lot of places that we could spend, but we want to make sure that we're maximizing that spend and getting the most out of every dollar.
And how do you think about certain niche audiences, niche communities? If we put on our official marketing hat, we'll say personas. And I want to give you a chance to respond to like something that's, in terms of marketing campaigns, that is still in the news a ton. And I'll give you an example. Sort of the Bud Light campaign that created a huge uproar from a lot of, maybe more conservative groups. They were appealing to a LGBTQ plus audience, and they had like a transgender influencer as part of that. And it's an interesting sort of, I think, case study for others because, Bud Light was ubiquitous, right? Like lots of people drink Bud Light. It was also, it was the number one beer in sales overall, and also the number one beer in sales for the LGBTQ plus community. And you could probably imagine people being in marketing meetings and say, hey, we got to ramp this up. We got to do it. But then worlds collided and created obviously a huge loss in value for Bud Light. So how do you think about any thoughts on that, which is on the news a ton, but beyond that, balancing niche audiences, you want to reach out, but then you have a mass market product and you've got to do that. And how do you make this all kind of work together?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like you said, we are a mass market insurer. Everyone who owns a car or home or, pet or rents an apartment is in the market for insurance. So we're always taking a combination to both a general population audience as well as more targeted audiences in spaces like, especially on the acquisition side where, we have more addressable audiences. We're very cognizant of the fact that if we grow across consumer segments, we need to create ads that are able to resonate with groups where they are. From a media standpoint, we're constantly evolving to test, learn, pivot into new tactics, targets, and mediums. But within each space, we're agile enough to know like where we want to optimize across the ever-changing media landscape. But for the most part, we are mass market, and we'll test and see if our ads are resonating with different audiences. But we're not doing sort of niche marketing at this time, just because it makes more economic sense for us to be more broad-based with our marketing.
Well, and what's your advice for testing? I mean, there's multiple ways to test, right? Like we could do things that are like, quick and dirty in social media, kind of in the wild, really small spend. We could do that. We can do more focus groups, more in-depth, more traditional kind of testing of creative. We could do more like, monitor brainwaves in people's minds and see what's activated. And I don't know if you do some of those things, say they're watching our commercial and the emu comes on and boom, we activated this part of their brain and we're really happy. So we can get real scientific. What have you found to be most effective that might be instructive to someone else that, maybe hasn't done as much testing because they're not dealing with the kind of ad dollars you are, but you are definitely doing it because you're trying to protect your spend before you spend?
Yeah, I have a lot to say on this topic. I mean, you're spot on. Like we're a data-driven company. We're an insurance company, of course. We love data. And so we are doing a tremendous amount of testing, especially because we do have bigger budgets. And, in the category, we are very much a challenger brand. We are outspent by a lot of our competitors. And so we have to really punch above our weight and make sure that everything we're doing is going to add a ton of incremental value. And so we do a lot of testing. I think, the best advice I could give is like, don't over-engineer it. Like you don't have to over-engineer it. Like if you really think about what is the question I'm trying to answer, oftentimes there's a, low effort, scrappier way to get at that answer than doing the brainwaves and all of the complicated research studies and methodologies. But we do use those when I would say the risks are and the stakes are a little bit higher. But for things like if we're testing within, YouTube or social, like it's often just like put it out there, see what happens, like, and let's continue to optimize. versus doing a more formal research setting where we're putting it in front of thousands of consumers, which we might do on the TV side where we're spending bigger dollars. So I think it depends, what your objective is, but oftentimes you can get to the answer of your research question in a much lower effort way.
And what is your sort of recommendations on using humor? I think humor is something that is exciting to people, right? They kind of want to do it, particularly if you get in the sort of like Super Bowl ad category or something like that. You're like, let's do something. But it's also daunting because you're like, it's a being funny. Everyone thinks they're funny, but everyone can't be funny, right? Like we can't all be funny. Someone has to be not funny. And it's a sense of taste. And it's also a sense of in sort of the cultural landscape. And you can also misfire with something you didn't intend to communicate. So people are like, want to use humor when I talk to marketers, but they're also wary of it a little bit of just like the danger of sort of trying too hard to be funny. What is your advice there for a brand that utilizes humor?
I think it's a very real concern. For someone in the insurance category, like in a commoditized category where we need to drive that top of mind awareness, like humor it's not a question of whether we use humor, it's a requirement. Because we know it's effective at breaking through that clutter and keeping the brand top of mind. We, as you can see from our ads, we leverage memorable moments through humor, like scenarios and characters, but we're often going back to making it memorable in a way that like draws on something that is relatable to folks, whether it be a certain scenario or some nostalgia. Like you've seen us play in that space of like, it's funny because it's true, because I've lived it, because I know that experience. That's worked pretty well for us. But the reality is humor is super subjective, and what's funny to some isn't funny to all. So it's important to kind of diversify how humor comes across and comes to life through your campaigns and your brand. Well done humor, I would say, shouldn't negatively impact your reputation. And in the best case, humor, I think, can make your brand more relatable. So it's a risk worth taking in my mind. I think, that relatable humor has been effective for us, but I think there's a variety of ways you can deliver humor in the marketplace.
Well, and we were, one of the tasks we had as an agency was we were tasked with bringing back Morris the cat, the original celebrity spokes cat, and refreshing Morris. And one of the things that we did was like our mantra was, in using humor and using, cat sort of things that cats do. It was like simple, surprising, and significant. Like simple, you got to get it fast, to your point about short attention span. Surprising, you got to do something to break through, something that is different, particularly in a category where other people are maybe, doing other things with we're in the pet category in this case. And significant, you got to say something. And what we learned, and I don't know if you've learned it, was that, we would do a lot of things with cats that would be, a cat would knock something over, or a cat would like sleep for a long time. They're funny cat things. But the key for us was, what's the human insight that comes from that? So we had a cat knock something over, and the message was, you know what? It's okay. You can make mistakes. Things happen. Don't beat yourself up. Things fall over. And that was like a human insight that resonated, even delivered through, a cat, photo and meme. I don't know if you've thought about that, but it's like, I'm interested in what you said about being memorable. It's not just funny, and maybe it doesn't have to be like a 10 on the funny scale. It could be a 6, but if it's memorable, that might be better than a 10 that you're going to forget.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, like we talked a lot about Limu and Doug, but one of our other campaigns that we're not running currently, but may come back. We did a campaign around home insurance, and it was all the whole concept was, research says you can that this certain advertising trope helps make ads more memorable. And one of the spots that we ran was a typical Christmas morning. The dad's recording the opening up presents, and one kid gets a bike, and the other one gets a box of Liberty Mutual insurance. And the kid with the bike is mad that his brother got this great gift, and we sort of worked our brand into that message, but that setting that, like, if you have siblings and you remember Christmas morning when you were a kid, you certainly remember comparing gifts, right? Like, you got something better than I did, or I want what he has or she has. And so, I think we found success when we deliver humor that is super relatable, that people have lived or know someone who's lived or have seen or heard that experience before. And that's just one example of a recent one we've done.
Well, and I think what you said there is interesting, because I think in terms of memory and the way we are all wired, it's that we connect what we don't know to things that we know. So that context is helpful. So you talked about this, Christmas morning, something that we can relate to that we know. So that's going to help us remember something maybe about, Liberty Mutual that we don't know. An example would be, if I had to describe to you a pomelo. What is a pomelo? I'm half Thai, so we use it in some Asian cooking, but I might say, oh, it's like a grapefruit, but it's bigger and it's like a sweet grapefruit. And then you can get it. Oh, a pomelo. It's like, okay, because you know what a grapefruit is. So that's interesting to think about, like, how do you relate it for recall to things that you know to help an audience understand something they don't.
Exactly. And that frame of reference is critical for us. I mean, Limu and Doug is based on that, right? It's like we know, the buddy duo, right? It's in tons and tons of movies over the years. And the difference is there's something unexpected about this duo in that you have a human and then you have a bird who doesn't talk. So that's been pretty successful for us. We go back to that often, this idea of, familiar, but slightly unexpected.
And how does that play into, I know you've done a lot with partnerships. I'm talking about Spider-Man. I'm talking about Minions. Is that part of that strategy, is like relate to something that people know and might be passionate or excited about and use that to halo off to your brand? Or how do you pick Spider-Man and Minions versus something other partnership that you might choose to do?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. These partnerships we've had to date have been these huge, movie franchises that if you haven't seen them all, you've at least seen one, or you know of the Minions, or of Spider-Man. And so that's been pretty successful for us. The way the partnership works is, we get access to that IP and using that in our ad in exchange for promoting the film for 3 seconds at the back end of our spot. So it's sort of a win-win for both the movie studio as well as us, because we're using that iconic IP. And then, that's the part that's familiar. And then you have Limu and Doug, in the case of the Spider-Man ad, like Doug wanting to be Spider-Man and getting bit by a spider and then having a reaction. And so that's sort of the unexpected part of it all. And then in terms of like how we select those movie partnerships, like, we're putting it through like a brand fit test, if you will, making sure that, our objectives are aligned, our brand reputation is healthy. Like, we're not going to be exposed to any sort of, negative press or anything like that. And so we're keeping that in mind. And we feel strongly about the movie franchises, just because they have so much history and so many people know those iconic characters.
And what is your advice for other brands maybe thinking about going down that route? I can tell you from our experience, we worked a lot on partnerships for the Secret Life of Pets movies as part of our work with pet brands. And I can tell you, working on that, it's exciting, but also a little challenging, at least for us, because there's a lot, when you have valuable IP, people like to protect the valuable IP. And there's a ton of stuff we thought were good ideas that ultimately we could not do because it crossed some line that honestly felt a little arbitrary and didn't feel like, but it's like, no, this is how it's done. We can't do it. So what is your advice? Was that your experience? What is your advice for others who are going to go down that partnerships with like IP that is highly protected by committees of people and lawyers?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, obviously they want to be super protective of their IP. It's like, the amount of consumers that know it, the reach it's had, the significance it's had in pop culture, like it makes perfect sense. We found success, and it kind of goes back to a conversation we were having earlier, which is because we do so much testing, we actually were able to work with, the studios to develop multiple different ways of creating assets. And then we would test them in front of consumers. And so we were never signing up to do anything they weren't comfortable with, of course, but we had that extra data point to say, well, consumers like this, or they found that offensive, or, whatever it might be. And so that worked really well. And then, we actually on the Spider-Man partnership, we did an extra activation with them that we sort of kind of like co-briefed, like we briefed it together, where it was like, we want to do some kind of like out of home activation, leveraging the Spider-Man IP. And so we kind of briefed their creatives on like, what could that look like? And the activation we came up with was leveraging the Daily Bugle and creating a newsstand in New York and a special Liberty Mutual sponsored Daily Bugle, edition of the paper. And We seeded it out to influencers, and we got a lot of foot traffic. And I think what made that work is that they were invested in doing something together, and there was co-creation there. And we relied heavily on them knowing their IP and knowing what was right for Spider-Man to be doing or not doing. And they respected, us having protection over our brand and Limu and Doug and what they should or should not be doing. And so it was a pretty good partnership. I totally get why they would be extra protective of that IP, but testing definitely won them over. And I would say co-creation was a big help.
Well, and I think actually your story is a great example of anything. When anyone pushes back on anything, if you have more data, you can it kind of gives you something in your arsenal. Say like, well, actually, let's look at the data. Here's what it shows. And usually, if you have the data and the other side doesn't, you kind of win, right? Because it's hard to get the data, and they're not going to go out and do this whole research study. So if you have it and you want to get something through, wouldn't you say that really helps? Just like look. Here, I'm not making this up. This is true.
100%. My team would say that one of my biggest phrases is win with data. So yeah, we are constantly winning with data, both internally and externally.
Okay, got it. Well, and to wrap up, talk about just how, the leadership side of being a CMO. We've talked a lot about the creative side. We've talked about some of the, kind of the sort of marketing strategies, but the leadership side, particularly in a time now where there's uncertainty in a number of facets. There's uncertainty in terms of, where the economy is and just how business is doing. There's uncertainty in terms of this post-pandemic period. There's also this uncertainty, I think, which is interesting now, which is just this work from office or work from home. And is my employer going to make me do 1 day, 2 day, 3 days, 3.5 days, 4 days, all days, no days at work, and different levels of sort of happiness with that. How do you manage that, and what's changed about your role as a leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been in leadership roles for, almost my entire career. And I would say the last few years have been the most challenging of them all. And I think you sort of go back to, the roots, right, of what makes an effective leader. And I think it holds true in normal times, and it holds true even more in unprecedented times. And that's setting a clear vision, right? To me, that's the most important step. If people know what they should be focused on, I think, and you give them a sort of a mission, everyone will get excited about that and rally behind that. I think Seth Godin said it and I think it's true for both leadership and marketing, but language only works when other people know what you're saying. And so I think having that clear vision of what you're focused on is critically important. Aligning on priorities and pursuing them with radical focus. I think we need radical focus now more than ever, given the economic environment and the pressure it's putting on our business and almost every business out there. And then just empowering and enabling the team to tackle those priorities, whether it be sort of removing roadblocks or providing air cover. I feel like that's my primary job, is just enabling and empowering the team to tackle the priorities that we've set forth. And I think that's important in normal times. Like I said, I think it's critically important now, and something I go back to often. But I think anytime there's any kind of change, and you mentioned a few of things that are happening right now, it's really important that folks feel like they're part of something, and that they have a mission and a purpose. And so whether that be for us, whether that be focusing on, building the brand, or focusing on reducing expenses because we have to in this economic environment, whatever it might be, as long as they're clear on what the mission is, I think, it's easy to create a really engaged team.
And how do you think, for some of those, you said removing roadblocks, providing air cover, are there examples of that go beyond, where the value goes beyond just the thing you unstuck? What I mean by that is yes, you do some things and we move past it, we've solved it, that provides value. But are there any examples where the act of doing that builds trust among the team, builds confidence among the team, builds a sense that, I don't know if it's my CMO has my back, or it's okay to make a mistake, and as long as we learn from it, or other things that we might associate with a high-performing marketing team that has a high degree of trust and a strong culture? Are there examples of just doing that where it's worth more than just the immediate benefit, maybe why you did it?
Yeah, I would say Yeah, a recent example is, we ended up like we have a lot of lines of business, of course, auto and home being the sort of the key ones, but we sell pet insurance, we sell business lines, we sell all kinds of different insurance products, and a few years ago we made the decision to exit one of those, and I had folks working on that exact line of business, and so it was a tough decision, of course, but like we were able to bring the folks along on the journey of and provide the why and the context of the decision making, and they felt confident, and I gave them this confidence that there's no shortage of work to do in our marketing team, and we're constantly prioritizing. And just because we're deprioritizing this line of business right now doesn't mean that the work they were doing wasn't valuable. It absolutely was, and it doesn't mean that they can't go add value somewhere else. And so I think a lot of it is, removing barriers, removing roadblocks, but I think it's also being able to make the tough decisions, bring the team along, make sure they have the context and the why. And I think you'll continue to build trust with them, and they'll know that you have their back. And that was just one example recently.
And final, it's a good example. Final question is, you mentioned setting a clear vision. You mentioned feeling like you're a part of something, having a purpose. As a final kind of parting thought, are there any examples, advice of things you've done that maybe someone else might be able to learn from? We love actionable advice for CMOs. It could be anything from a happy hour, that actually was a great thing, to a totally, unrelated something else, or an offsite you did, to, I don't know, a message you sent, or something else. And maybe not even you, maybe it was someone else on your team that did something. Any other final tip and final thought to like feel like you're a part of something? What can we as CMOs or marketing leaders maybe do or try as a tactic?
Yeah, I'll give you two examples. One is for every single new hire, and we've done this since we launched Limu and Doug, actually. I send a welcome package to every single new hire with a handwritten note from me, and we have Limu and Doug swag in there, notebooks, and a Limu plushie, and a couple other items. And that's been hugely popular with folks, especially when we were hiring people in a virtual environment and they had no connectivity to the department in which they were working. The second thing is every other week I have what's called a flash briefing. It's a 15-minute meeting. It's meant for cascading information in a really timely manner. I usually have 7 or so minutes of content and then have it open for Q&A. And so it's an opportunity for me to see the entire department every other week. And it's an opportunity for them to get information firsthand, ask questions. And it's been a really good culture builder for us in terms of bringing the entire team together. And we do icebreakers to kick it off. And then, we're giving the timely information and then allowing for Q&A. And it's been interesting to see how the questions have evolved, where I think when we first introduced it, people were a little nervous to ask questions, and you could see their questions were a little bit more generic, I would say. And now, I get grilled sometimes, and I'm happy about that. I think that speaks volumes. If people are comfortable enough to ask questions that make me uncomfortable. And that's what we've been seeing lately, which is awesome. So I'm going to continue that for them.
This amazing episode was brought to you by Top Thought Leader. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe.